Hi guys, welcome back to the channel, and today I'm going to be doing a book review of This Is Kind of an Epic Love Story by Kheryn Calleneder. I'm gonna go ahead and forewarn you, spoilers from this point on, like about the story, so if you don't want spoilers, I'm sorry, this is not the book review for you. Please exit stage left, thank you. So I just got done reading this book, and I'm pretty sure it came out late last year. I'm not sure. Sometime in 2018. Should have looked it up, but I didn't. But anyway, one of my favorite authors, Becky Albertalli, she wrote Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda, which is now the movie Love, Simon. And she suggested this book on her Instagram story one day, and I was, really kind of into it when I read the summary and whatnot. So yeah, I decided to pick it up and I really liked it. So let's get started. So the book is based around this kid who is in junior year of high school. His name is Nathan Bird. Most of his friends just refer to him as Bird. And it's kind of centered around his friend group, which consists of Florence Lim, which is kind of the motherly figure of the group, and Ashley, who is kind of like the misfit outcast. She's big, bubbly, not a lot of people supposedly like her, and she's really smart and all that good stuff. And Gideon, who's kind of the more, of the douchebaggy, very honest kind of character. I don't want to say douchebaggy because, he's not that bad, but he's kind of bad. So it's kind of centered around them and how, now at the point where the book starts, this is kind of where we get to know a lot about the main character, Nate, and how, his dad just died recently, and how his life isn't horrible, but it's kind of just, kind of on just the straight and narrow path because he is too afraid to come out of his shell and actually apply himself to things and do things because he has inner turmoil on how he thinks that nothing good can come out of anything, like out of trying. It's always going to end in disappointment, and it's not always going to have a good ending, which is a very cynical way to look at things. And which really resonated with me, and I think with a lot of other people, because in life, especially whenever you're younger, or, maybe even when you're older, who knows, but you always just go to worst case scenario about things. Like, you're always just so scared to do things and put yourself out there because you're afraid of what the world might say back to you, or what the consequences of putting yourself out there does. And that really resonated with me because, honey, I don't like to put myself out there at all. But, you have to eventually. And we also find out in the beginning of the book that him referring to Nate, and Florence actually had a relationship. Every time they talk about it in the book, it's always referred to as a great relationship. It was a great relationship. But sadly, ended up coming to an end whenever Florence cheated on Nate by kissing this woman named Lydia, who ends up being kind of an asshole. But, yeah, so you can definitely tell that there's a lot of inner turmoil with Nate, and the fact that his father has died, leaving him to look at his mother and see that she's kind of a mess. She just sits on the couch all day and doesn't really do a lot, and how depressed she is, and the fact that his relationship with Florence actually ended. So he's just kind of very cynical at this point, very pessimistic. He doesn't have a great outlook on life at this point. And all that tends to change whenever his childhood best friend, Oliver James Hernandez, comes back into his life by moving back to Seattle from New Mexico. So what I found really, really cool about this storyline is the fact that when Oliver is first introduced, there is a lot of alluding to a situation that happened in the past that they just don't address fully. And like even Florence and Ashley and Gideon, they'll look around and they'll be all like, so you two know each other, you know, he's supposed to be the new kid, but Nate, you already know Oliver, so there's history there, and you know, their interactions are kind of awkward, so people are like, what's going on? Like, y'all know each other, y'all should be happy, like, what happened? And they don't really address it, you know, immediately, but eventually we do find out that as a kid, Nate developed feelings for Oliver and kissed Oliver, and Oliver didn't exactly know how to deal with it at that time because they were so young. So Oliver just kind of left and, you know, moved with his family to New Mexico without really even saying goodbye, which really hurts. And then Oliver also ignored all of Nate's texts and emails and everything, so Nate just kind of gave up on it, and he assumed that he lost feelings for Oliver whenever he moved. But fortunately, we find out later that those feelings never really went away. They were just suppressed for a while Oliver was gone, but now that he's back, he's continuing to develop these feelings for Oliver while also kind of staying in the past with Florence, because Florence says multiple times in the book, we're better as friends. What we had was great, but it's not there. And Nate just keeps going on about why. Why didn't it work? Why wasn't it this? Why wasn't it that? And at some point, you know, you just have to accept that sometimes it's just not meant to be. You know, you think you could have great chemistry, but being friends and then becoming something more sometimes it just doesn't work out, and that's completely fine. And towards the end of the book, or towards the middle, a little towards the end, he finally starts to understand that what him and Flo had was great, but they're not meant to be together. And I think that's what's really, really important about this book, especially in that whenever things don't work out, that doesn't mean the ending has to be bad, and that doesn't mean there wasn't happiness in between the bad times as well. And I think that's definitely a theme that's that's definitely all the way through this book, and even in the ending, you finally, like, you know, whenever Oliver and Nathan finally get together, you know, Nate in his head is all like, this might end bad, but I'm happy right now, and that's all that matters. And in reality, that's all that matters, because we can't control the future. No matter how hard we try, we can't control it. So it's best to just live in the moment for the most part. Sorry about that tangent. And another thing I really like about this book is how it addressed grief, because the book is set 7 years after Nathan's father died. And you can tell how even after all this time, grief is a never-ending process. You see his mom, in the beginning of the book, she's very, very depressed, very strict on him. You know, he has a curfew when everyone else in his grade does. He isn't allowed to go anywhere without texting her on the hour where he is and what he's doing, and if he doesn't give her notice, he's probably not going. So that it shows a lot of that, and how she is just so scared to let him go. Whenever, you know, she lost her husband, and she's still grieving. So that was definitely something that I also liked about this book. And another thing I liked about this book is it didn't focus on him trying to figure out what his sexuality was. It was a lot of him knowing who he was already. I'm assuming, I don't want to label him, but if I had to label him, I'd label him bisexual. But, you know, it's never really addressed in the book. It doesn't say, they don't capitalize on the whole figuring out who you are, which I honestly love, because there's a lot of LGBT books out there that I feel like, you know, I've already done my coming out thing. I don't really relate too much to that, but I do understand it and whatnot, but I just like that there's a book out there where the main character knows their sexuality. They know all there is to know about themselves. So I really appreciated that as well. That's just a little side note, though. And another thing I really appreciated about this book is that it showed how even, when we're kids, our parents might want us to come home at a certain time. We might have a curfew, but because of our friends and because of all the important relationships we establish, we kind of go into a rebellious stage where we don't end up, listening to our parents as much. So that's another good thing I liked about this book as well. And also, towards the end of the book, whenever Nate applies for this contest that Oliver suggests to him, and Nate is finally able to finish a script, because that's what he wants to be when he grows up. He wants to be a screenwriter. At first, his mother is very like, you can't go. This is too expensive. This is too that. And he's like, why about this? He was like, just because you're afraid to live your life since dad died, I mean, I have to live mine, and I can't go anywhere and do anything without having to feel sorry for you. So it showed a lot of inner turmoil between him and his mother, which I can completely understand with, because we love our family, we love our parents, but at the same time, sometimes we don't understand why they do things, and sometimes our parents aren't always right. I mean, knowing that they have the best intention for us, sometimes our parents aren't always right. Which is another thing I really liked about this book. It very, very much humanized and brought realness to all the characters. And I love that. I really do. And another thing I hadn't touched on. His sister, Becca. Nate has a sister named Becca who is pretty good. She doesn't show up. I mean, she shows up a little bit, but I mean, mostly she's kind of absent for a lot of the stuff that goes down, but Nate does fill her in on everything that's going on. And she's very Nate's, like, the one that tells him, that gives him advice and stuff, besides Florence, because, I would like to consider Florence the motherly figure of their little group. But Nate's sister Becca is definitely like the angel on his shoulder. She comes and she gives him great advice, and she listens to him while still keeping, the whole I'm your older sibling, so you suck attitude sometimes, the kind of picking up and whatnot. And yeah, I know that was probably all over the place, but this is my first book review. But honestly, I really enjoyed this book. I'm sorry if you watched to this point and you got the spoilers, but I also warned you. I apologize, but you were warned. This is a great book. I honestly absolutely love it. It was nice, lighthearted, heartbreaking at times, but honestly, it was kind of an epic love story. Hey guys, and another thing I forgot to mention that this book does address, and I think does a really good job on, is the fact that Oliver James Hernandez, is deaf. He had an accident when he was, I think he had no, it wasn't an accident, it was an illness whenever he was younger, which led him to lose hearing, mostly all hearing in both ears. So he does read lips, and this book does rely heavily on sign language, even though it doesn't rely on it all the time, just so it keeps you on your toes and it doesn't keep you, doesn't keep throwing it at you. But I thought this was a really cool tactic, a really cool a character trait, because, I haven't read any book where there's been one of the main characters is deaf. So I thought that was beautifully handled. It was great. And I thought, the book did a great job of just not doing it offensively, which I thought was very, very sweet. And I honestly loved it, because all of the main cast, if they are talking to Ollie and he can't really read their lips, they hand him his phone. They hand him their phone. And he reads what they're saying on their phone, which I think is really nice. But for the most part, he does read lips pretty good. So yeah, that's another thing I wanted to throw in there at you. So yeah, that was my thoughts on This Is Kind of an Epic Love Story. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.